Okay.
video either in full or a part like on YouTube or social
Okay.
media. Okay? All right.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, Greg, thanks so much for always being willing to hop on Java with Julie. We've had some fun conversations over the years. Sometimes Erin has joined you, but this time I get you solo.
I
And
know it's dangerous because she's the better of the two of us.
she balances you out, but you're awfully wise and fun just alone. And the topic we're going to tackle today is a hard one. It's not a light topic. I wanted to talk to you about individuals or marriages who find themselves in the space of considering divorce.
Yeah.
And, this is obviously the spectrum. There are marriages that have been struggling for a long time. I think in recent years, we've seen a lot of younger marriages where it's just marriage is not what they thought it would be. And within 5 to 7 years, they're not sure if they're going to make it.
Yeah.
And we might be talking to just one person in that equation, either the person who wants out of the marriage or the person who wants to keep it together. So that's kind of where we're headed today. I don't know if you even have some initial thoughts as I introduce that topic.
Yeah. I tell you, for Aaron and I mean, we've been married now 32 years, and there was probably 3, 4 years into our marriage, we were there. I really didn't think we were going to stay married. I knew Aaron, one, didn't like me because of what we were going through. Our hearts were really shut down to each other, and I just thought we were one more big kind of argument, big blow up away from her leaving. And so I just remember that season and how dark it felt, how confusing it felt. I mean, I just remember going, God, did I not hear you right? What did I miss here? Maybe I wasn't supposed to marry Aaron. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's her. Maybe it's just we can't figure this out. Like, I was just so confused. I couldn't wrap my head around, why can we not make this work? Because, I mean, all of us stand at the altar going, hey, this is a lifelong covenant, and we're going to have an awesome marriage full of ups and downs, certainly. But I never thought that we'd get to that place to where I just didn't think we were going to make it. And so
Mm.
I personally remember feeling that way. We walked with our oldest daughter through a divorce. And so that even gave me a different perspective on just what that's like, for our daughter, especially for a daughter who was really wanting to make the marriage work and had a spouse that was unwilling. And so that helped me see things very differently. And that, again, those are it's all it's just it's those are such hard seasons.
Hmm. I know it was a long time ago, but what do you think it was that kept you in the marriage when you felt like it wasn't going to work?
Yeah, I think for me, um, again, unique to who I was. I was getting my finishing up my doctorate to go into the marriage and family world. I mean, my father was a guy named Gary Smalley, and so I had all these dreams of working with him and doing marriage stuff and teaching about marriage. And so it was hard for me to go, that's what I'm dreaming about doing. So I didn't think that I could get divorced. And so I just figured we would somehow figure this out. And so I think that it created some constraints for me. In
Hmm.
there was no abuse going on, there was no infidelity, there was nothing like that. We just we were so horrible at working through our differences. And so the conflict we would get into, we were both kind of fighters, and so it would just escalate. Again, no abuse. It wouldn't get to that level, but I just remember thinking, you know, I don't know what to do. But it just divorce never occurred to me because I'm like, well, then I can't do what I want to do in life. In which wasn't true per se. I mean, I think I could have done those things, but it just that constraint. There's a
Hmm.
guy, Dr. Scott Stanley, has written a lot about commitment, and talks about there's times when the marriage hits those really, really hard times, that there can be just some natural constraints. Either, we're worried about the kids and what the impact will do, so we wait, or, you know, religiously, so,
Mhm.
God doesn't want this for me, and so we're going to wait. So there can be some of that that actually can help turn things around. If it that's the big thing between cohabitation and marriage, is that it's very easy to walk away from that kind of cohabitating relationship versus, it's not easy to walk away from a marriage.
Yeah.
In some of that constraint can actually help. The research shows, for a lot of couples who were really at a bad place, who waited for whatever reason, 5 years later, those couples were back on track, and they were feeling much better and growing in their marriage. I'm just thankful that, for me, that constraint, of, well, what will this look like to my dad, or what will this look like to what I'm trying to go into, kind of helped me to not jump ship and bail.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Sometimes it's financial constraints of
Right.
I can't support this
Yep.
family or reputational, what will my
Right.
church think, what my family think.
Right.
And sometimes that does keep us in a marriage when it'd be easier to jump out. And I think part of what we're seeing today is some of those constraints are falling. Like there's not so much of a taboo anymore,
Right.
even within Christian communities for divorce. And actually, there can be pockets within the church that are kind of promoting, like, if you're not happy, maybe this isn't the one God has for you. And
Yeah.
so, I think when younger marriages, when you're hitting that, 3 to 5 year, this is really hard. I don't know if I knew who I was marrying. Uh, we're seeing fewer and fewer that have reason to stay and work it out
Yeah.
like you did.
Yeah.
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 Um,
And it's so unfortunate, because happiness is such a poor target for a marriage. I'm a huge proponent of happiness, but as a goal for a marriage, that's so elusive, that because what does it mean when you're not happy? Then does it mean something's wrong, or we weren't meant to be together, or we need to find someone who will make us happy? It's a really tough goal, versus understanding that marriage isn't about pursuing happiness. It's about finding this person that I want to spend my life with, making that commitment, going, so, let's keep growing. Let's experience the highs, the lows, all of that is a part of the journey. And my hope is that, really, I always tell my kids, because you see that idea of happiness, every single, like, we came off of Christmas, and so, all these Hallmark Christmas movies, or, just all these romantic movies. I am telling you, you will hear, well, I just want you to be happy, or I just want my son, my daughter to be happy. Like, you hear that constantly. That's so reinforced. And I always tell my kids, honestly, that's not my goal for you. I want you to grow. in
mhm,
in in you know when you lived nearby us here in Colorado, you remember the beautiful mountains,
mhm,
as you hike up those mountains, there's less and less, growth up there. It just kind of becomes rocks at like 13,000 feet. You're having a mountaintop experience, but there's no growth there. Growth happens in the valley. That is so
mhm,
true for marriage. Like, Aaron and I don't grow when everything's going great and we're having these really mountaintop, fun, high experiences. We're gonna grow when we're struggling and working through something. And to me, that's what my hope is for my kids, is to say, I hope you enjoy your your spouse and have so much fun. And I hope you experience that happiness, but man, focus on growing as individuals and as a couple. Make that your goal, your pursuit.
mhm. And Greg, I think another kind of snapshot of what can happen when somebody's considering divorce is they've been married a long time and they've had some good seasons, they've had some hard seasons, but they're just tired. And
Yeah.
maybe it's been the kids that have held them together, but something changes. Perhaps it's the empty nest, but they come to the conclusion that we've outgrown each other.
Yeah.
where we no longer feel compatible. Maybe I married you in a season where you really were meeting some needs for me, but I don't have those needs anymore, or we've grown apart over the years. How do you counsel somebody who finds themselves in that situation?
Yeah, it makes sense. There's always going to be a natural drift in all of our relationships. We're busy. And
Hmm.
when we put our time and effort into careers and kids and hobbies and church and friends and whatever that list is, it would make total sense for someone to feel that way. But I tell you that the beautiful part is that, what was neglected is the curiosity, the discovery. I love in First Peter 3, talking to husbands, where it says, live with your wife in an understanding way. If you take that word understanding and really explore kind of that Greek meaning, that another word that works there is knowledgeable. And so part of what we're being encouraged to do, I know for me as a husband, is to live with my wife, to live with Erin in a knowledgeable way. That requires an ongoing intentional pursuit of staying current and updated, knowing that she's constantly changing, I'm changing, our marriage is changing, life is changing. And sadly, if we're just drifting through life together and we're not being intentional, it's most certainly can feel like, just, we're so married, we're married roommates, we just,
Mm.
we're just different people now. And that is true. And what is also true is that it's like, for my wife, for Erin right now, she's getting her doctorate. And so it's been so much fun to see her over the last 2 years, growing, learning, becoming knowledgeable. Look what she's done in 2 years. Well, what if we did that in our marriage? So what if we say, okay, yeah, we've drifted so far apart. It's knowledge that's going to bring us back. It's that idea of going, man, I want to rediscover you. That takes
Yeah.
time, that takes effort, but that is 100% doable. That's just simply about going, all right, let's start rediscovering each other. And we promote, there's even fun ways to do that. You just grab conversation starters. I mean, just
Hmm.
Google marriage conversation starters, start there. So Julie, there's ways to where a couple that has felt like they're so far drifted apart, that's very easy to come back together. And now you
Hmm.
get to learn and fall in love all over again. It's how we first met and fell in love. We spent all this time learning and asking and being curious with each other. That happened in the beginning. That can most certainly happen now.
Yeah, I believe what you're saying that it can. I think what sometimes is difficult though is when we first fell in love, we didn't have years of resentments
Baggage,
and
sure.
baggage. And so, you even said the phrase, I wanted to learn about you. I want to discover together. There's some people who can't say that. Like, I don't want to be with you. Like
Yeah.
uh I feel hurt. I feel like you don't meet my needs. I don't feel safe with you. And so even the invitation to reignite a flame has some hurdles to get over. How
Oh,
would you?
100%.
Yeah, I mean, that's a person that's like, maybe I do better off starting with somebody else, or even better
Yeah.
off being alone. And they might even say, like, I don't want to stay in this marriage just because I have to. Like, I'll be miserable for the rest of my life. And I'm sure you've met with people who have felt that way.
Oh, 100%.
Hmm.
We were working with a couple the other day that exactly as you described that.
Hmm.
Just saying we're miserable, we've grown so far apart, we don't feel like we have anything in common. And so I think to your point, I think evaluating maybe what are the barriers there? Like you said, I mean, if it's that I don't feel safe, so I'm not really not going to open up to be known, to be seen. I mean, that's different. So I mean, that's when you would want to go in and really work with a good Christian counselor to go, how do we create a marriage that feels like the safest place on earth? I mean, what's missing? What are we doing? It feels unsafe to each other. Because 100%, I mean, if two people are willing and we've just drifted and we just need to spend some time rediscovering each other, great. do that. But you're right. If conflict has been so poorly handled and we just don't feel safe with each other, we need help to work through that and to figure that out. I would say, man, don't do that alone. I mean, really go get some
Mhm.
good help, and there's great help out there. If there's been betrayal, if there's been, whatever those issues are, if trust has been broken, man, let's identify what seems to be the barrier here, and there's great help if both people are willing.
Mhm.
So the logical question is, okay, so what if it's just you? Like when my daughter, she 100% was open to getting any sort of help, but her partner was not, and he was unwilling to do anything. And that's such a hard reality for some. I think if
Yeah.
that's going on, I would always say at some point a boundary needs to be put in place to shake the system up. And so Aaron wrote this fantastic article about a healing separation that
Mhm.
I think is one of the most powerful tools for a couple who that one is so unwilling to get help, so just so committed to doing the same old. And so for that person who's just going, I'm not willing to exist like this anymore. I praise you. I go, awesome. Don't keep trying to do the same thing, hoping that it'll create new something different. I mean, we tongue in cheek joke about that being sort of the definition of insanity, doing the same
Mhm.
thing, hoping for different results. So to that person, I would say, shake the system up.
Mhm.
Systems fight so hard to stay the same. Systems don't like to change. You think of
Yeah.
the Israelites coming out of the wilderness or coming out of Egypt. At what point did they start grumbling like, well, we're better off back in slavery? Let's go back because it was familiar and they knew how to do life, although it was horrible. And same thing for our marriage. We can get used to whatever is going on, whatever system we've created. But I would say to that person who's saying this isn't working for me anymore, great, do something then. And if that means going, listen, I'm not willing to do this, and so I'm going to file a healing separation. If you're
Mhm.
willing to go in and get help with me, awesome. I'd love to do that, but I'm not just willing to keep sitting here doing nothing. And
Yeah.
that's not healthy, good for either person. And so
Mhm.
that can be, Julia, a great next step for someone to go, I'm serious. Like, this is serious. And there's ways to do that, and that requires a counselor. That healing separation is something you do with the guidance of a counselor, so that it's not just a precursor, a first step towards divorce. It's actually intended to create healing and growth and change within a system that's no longer working for one or for both.
Yeah, it kinda creates a crisis where,
Yeah.
we can't pretend. We can't
Right.
pretend that things are going well. Uh,
Yeah.
Talk to me for a minute about why a person would stay in a marriage like that. Let's say there isn't infidelity, there isn't abuse, it's just not fulfilling. And I
Yeah.
think particularly, like, I'm thinking of an influencer that I follow on social media who's married for a couple decades, had kids. They quote unquote grew apart, like, we're just not good for each other anymore. And then the social media feed is filled with, highlights with the new boyfriend and how wonderful this is and how much better life is now. And
Yeah.
I think we get those messages a lot, particularly, a couple decades into marriage, where you start to think, well, maybe I would be a lot more fulfilled in another relationship. So why is that not the best route to go?
Yeah. I think that one, the research that's been done talking to people who've gone through a divorce, Julie, most often, I mean, lots of them. So I can't remember the percentage, but enough to where it makes you go, wow, say, man, I wish I would have done something else. I wish I wouldn't have walked away. Even if it's quick or, like you said, a very
Mhm.
long term. There's the grass I've never seen the grass is greener on the other side. And again, I always feel responsible to qualify that. I'm not talking about in the case where there's abuse. So I'm not talking about that at all. That's never okay. That's horrendous. I don't support that. Focus on the family doesn't support that. If you're in an abusive relationship like that, you need to leave and get help and deal in the safety of the individuals are more important than that marriage. And I would say God sent his son to die for people, not for marriage. And
Mm,
so in an abusive relationship, that breaks his heart. That breaks my heart for you. You're right that there's courage there to say that I'm not willing to be abused like that anymore. But so outside of that, that wherever we go, there we are. So
mhm,
there's it's rare to, unless you're married to a complete sociopath or something, that two people create the system that we're living in. And wherever I go, there I am. I'm bringing all that stuff. If I'm not getting the help I need to deal with my side of the stuff, you're just walking that into a new relationship. And that's why for a lot of people, they're like, well, recreated a lot of what was going on in the first marriage and the second marriage. And, boy, I wish I would have stayed and got the help. So I think there can be some of that. If we share children, it's not that you're never going to see this person ever again. You got
mhm,
to learn to get along and figure that out. So, I mean, that's an ongoing reality. So the hope is to go, can we go and get the help that we need? And that's
mhm.
the ideal. And I know that one of you might be willing, but that's when you say, okay, I'm not going to keep it just existing then in this miserable place. Like, let's go get help. And if not, then I'm going to separate. Hopefully, again, that'll shake things up to where there's some willingness. But I never, Julie, I don't know about you, but I just, people ask me, they'll lay out their situation. What do you think? Do you think I should get divorced? And I have never in my life, nor would I ever say, oh yeah or no, because that's between you and the Lord. you
Yeah.
know, I mean, I hope that I could be used to answer a lot of questions and
Mhm.
help you think it through, but I'm not going to tell you one way or the other, nor should anybody. Like
Yeah.
if someone's telling you, yeah, I think you should do this, that, and that's between you and the Lord. You're the one that's going to stand before the Lord and answer for that. And so that needs to be a
Mhm.
very clear thing between you and the Lord, not because someone else did it. Julie, divorce is contagious. We know that. We know that when friend groups, when someone divorces, when a pastor divorces, it just throws people. And there can be
Mhm.
some of that, oh, well, if that person did it that I know and love, maybe. So it's just it's just recognizing that this is hard. I mean, you started by saying
Mhm.
this is not a fun ha ha conversation that we're going to have. I mean, this is a tough deal because, you know, couples who are at that place, one or both hearts are probably pretty hardened. And
Yeah.
Jesus talks about that in the Bible. Well, Moses permitted you to divorce because of the hardness of your heart. I mean, and he says that's not the way it was in the beginning. When we first start off in our relationship, our hearts are open. We're
Mhm.
probably feeling pretty safe. And then over time, whatever's going on, hearts begin to close, and over time they harden. And and that's a pretty dangerous place when your heart is hardened to make decisions about your marriage. That's a tough way to do that because you're so shut down, which is why I go, man, go in and talk to a good counselor and help that. I mean, ideally you would do the work to one, get your heart back open
Yeah.
and make decisions then when your heart is open and you're connected to the Lord and you're praying that through. I mean, that's ideal. I always tell people who are going through hard marriage seasons that honestly, your greatest battle is to keep your heart open
Mm.
because you can see someone who's praying faithfully, God, restore my marriage, who's invested. I want to do anything. I want to grow. And at some point, they get so discouraged that their heart shuts down and starts
Right.
to harden. And then also, it's like you see the other person finally wakes up and goes,
Yeah.
okay, now I'm ready. And now you've got that first person where their heart's been allowed to harden. And it makes sense, and I get it. So there's no judgment there. But I just encourage people. your greatest battle through this thing is to keep your own heart open. That's got to be something you're thinking about and really protecting and guarding.
Hmm. Okay, so how would you keep your heart open and keep yourself safe at the same time? And again,
Yeah,
we're not talking about abuse situations, but a situation where you really are praying and wanting this marriage to be healed, maybe for years, and your spouse is not open, or a situation where there's been betrayal, infidelity, perhaps like ongoing pornography use. And again, your desire is for healing and reconciliation, but you're like, I don't know if I'm just going to get hurt again. I don't know if
yeah,
I'm setting myself up for another fall.
yeah. Which makes sense. And that's why I say probably one of the greatest skills that we can ever learn in a marriage is how do we care for our own heart? What are
Hmm.
we doing? Are we paying attention to our guts and our intuition? Are we paying attention to our emotions? Are we setting boundaries? A Christ-like boundary is we put something in place inside of our marriage or whatever relationship solely to keep our heart open. It's not about erecting walls. It's actually saying, "Hey, my heart matters, and this is happening, and that's not okay." Sometimes it's putting a boundary by saying, I'm no longer going to stay in conversations to where you expressing your emotions is at my expense. I'm just not willing to do that. That's not caring for me or for you. So it could be that sort of boundary, but boundaries are intended to help us keep our hearts open. So
Hmm.
part of going, man, I want my heart so well cared for is not only are you paying attention to your emotions, I'm feeling, you know, whatever, so discouraged, I'm feeling, so unimportant, so worthless, so whatever. And you're really caring for those emotions that you're putting boundaries in place. You're trusting your guts and your intuition on things because it's so easy often, especially for women, I think. I mean, it's probably better coming from you, but it seems like for a lot of women, they just, it's so hard to trust that gut because we've been, not we, but for women, get that thrown in their face or just constantly told that's not true and almost gaslit, whatever. But it's boundaries, caring for your heart helps to keep your heart open. A community, you cannot do this alone. You've got to have good same sex friends that are safe and trustworthy and will hold all this in confidence, who won't turn on your spouse, but who are there to care for you, to encourage you, to create some accountability. I mean, all of that. I think those are the kinds of things that when we're doing it, that we're really caring for our hearts. We're doing the kinds
Hmm.
of self-care things.
Hmm.
What do I need to do to find rest? What gives me life? What fills me up and recharges me? I think all of that in the season of a difficult marriage is what you're doing to be so well cared for that your heart is going to stay open to what God may be doing in your spouse.
Hmm.
And we've got that confidence. We have a God of this universe, all powerful, who is right there with you, with your spouse. He's passionate about marriage. He's passionate about your marriage. And you just never know the timing of when he's going to move someone's heart. That's why I say, therefore, man, really be thinking about how am I caring for my heart so that I'm got some confidence there. I can stay in this situation a little bit longer with certain boundaries set, and that's ideal. But that, Julie, no one teaches us to do that, right?
Mm-mm.
That's a
No, they
foreign
don't.
concept to a lot of people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it is.
So
And
that's again why you can go into counseling. I mean, a good
yeah.
counselor is going to help you do that.
And I like the distinction you made between boundaries and walls. And when we don't
Yeah.
have boundaries, we get to the place where, like, I've tried everything, I'm tired of getting hurt, and you put up a big wall.
Yeah.
And boundaries keep you from that place. Yeah, I agree with you, Greg, that I don't give advice of you should get a divorce, you shouldn't get a divorce. Like, I feel like especially counseling somebody to get a divorce, like that's heavy.
Yeah.
Uh, but I do think it's helpful for people who are in that place to have some principles, not
Mhm.
just like, oh, go figure it out, trust your
Yeah.
gut, that sort of thing. We do need principles. So, what are some principles that you would encourage somebody to consider? Uh, Biblical principles and also just wise principles in terms of if you're in that place, here's some things that you should be considering.
Yeah. I think that again, to keep my heart open, so a principle is an open heartedness, understand that God is speaking to us, that God is caring for us, and I need to keep my heart open. I want to be so well connected to the Lord that I'm hearing that still small voice. I'm sensitive to the Holy Spirit, and therefore I want to have community. Community is so important as we do this because I don't trust myself. You know, when
Mhm.
when Aaron and I are really struggling, it made sense in my own mind to go, she's got issues that probably are never going to change. So it probably is better to, cut bait and move on now before we have kids or whatever. And so just making sure that I recognize the power and the wisdom of having wise counsel in my life through a pastor, a mentor, a counselor, good friends. And so I think being understanding as Jesus laid out, reasons for divorce, really understanding what those are. And because you could ask the theologians, and oftentimes they're going to give you a little bit of a different answer of, well, what does this one really mean? Or what constitutes abuse? And is it physical only or emotional as well? So I think really understanding that, and that could be a thing where you talk to your pastor and get some good wisdom around just, hey, is I'm thinking about this, is this permissible in terms of what God's word says? That matters. And I think you said this earlier, is that we are, especially our Christian culture, we're we've moved to a place of just it's not taboo. It's there's there's a there's just reasons I hear a lot from well-meaning Christians, and I'm like, man, that is not biblical though.
Mhm.
And this isn't to say, therefore, you need to stay stuck and you need to stay in an abusive relationship. That's a part of your responsibility between you and the Lord, just to understand what He's saying. And therefore, God, what does this look like in my life, unique to me? Um, I think that creates that integrity that you're looking for. I think principles of integrity of who am I? Who did God create me to be? And how do I want to show up right now in this really hard season? Because it's so easy to begin from behind those walls to fling arrows and go on the offensive and go on the attack and compromise who God made me to be. It makes so much sense when we're really hurting and hearts are closed that we can say and do things that aren't
Mhm.
integrous. It's not who
Mhm.
we are. And pay attention to that. Am I doing things that are so unlike me? And how do I step back and get the help that I need to get my heart back open and well cared for, so I don't show up like that?
Mhm.
Because like for my daughter, I remember there was a moment in what Taylor was going through, that at some point, as they were dividing up assets, he said to her, "Well, hey, and don't be all like you're the only one who doesn't want a divorce, because you're not." And
Mhm.
so she heard that like, "Great, let's go get help.
Mhm.
My parents can get us into Hope Restored, a marriage intensive program, like today." And
Mhm.
he goes, "Yeah, I thought about that, but I've decided you're just not worth it."
Wow.
And you
Oh,
just, I mean, as a dad, when hearing about that,
yeah.
made me want to go, how could I hide his body and actually get
Yeah.
away with it? So, but
Yes.
beyond that, just going recognizing that Satan is all over
Mm.
marriage issues and in those hard seasons, and he wants to spread those lies and get them etched deeply within our hearts. And so for
Mhm.
Taylor, a part of a part of what she had to really start doing was, God, what is your truth here? What's your truth about me, about this marriage, about this person who is so hurting me? And so even that spiritual warfare, just being aware of that, how Satan is going to go after you with lies, that you're a
Mhm.
failure, that you're not worth it, whatever those might be. And so
Yeah.
even within that, I feel like I'm rambling and I'm all over the
Mm-mm.
board, but that just came to mind, that that's a big part of the battle of going, I know Satan is after my heart, my mind, and he's going to try to use these lies of what's going on to further shut me down. And so
Mhm.
just battle that stuff. Again, great counselors can help you do that.
Yeah. But you're giving great counsel, Greg. You're not rambling at all. And whenever I'm in the middle of spiritual battles, I always know there's lies involved.
Yeah,
And so
always.
I've learned to ask the question, okay, what is the lie I'm believing or being tempted to believe? And a lot of times, particularly if it's a really hard situation, I can't see it for myself. And as you're saying, that's why we need the outside ears and
Yeah,
eyes to tell us, hey, this is what I see, or this is what I hear you saying.
yeah,
That discernment that can come from good counselors, a good mentor,
right.
pastor, and certainly community.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, sometimes when we find ourselves in that situation of considering divorce, being in that place of pain, we react to pain by withdrawing. And
yeah,
so we withdraw from our communities. We don't want to tell anybody what we're going through because there's a lot of shame. And so we're trying to make this decision isolated, which makes it
yeah,
worse.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was, Aaron and I, every year we try to do something to grow, and so as we were seeing a counselor, nothing going on. We just want to
Hmm.
grow.
Yeah.
And one of my big takeaways from our time with this person is, she said that pain always deserves a response. And 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 I think that what's so true about that is that, first and foremost, my pain, I can always respond to my pain. And by doing a lot of what we're talking about, I think, I wrote 2 books: How to Win Your Husband Back, How to Win Your Wife Back, and interviewed hundreds of people who had kind of been through that journey, a lot successfully, some not, and their
Hmm.
marriage wasn't restored. But they all said the same thing: is that the turning point was when they really stopped focusing, and which sounds weird, but they stopped focusing on the marriage and really started focusing on their growth as an individual, and allow God to do the work in them, their blind spots, their pain deserves that response that he can give, people can give. Your spouse may not be willing to give and respond to your pain, but you can. The Lord always will. Your good, close, same sex friends and counselors, all that. And so that was a huge just takeaway, because for me, as Aaron and I, repair, an argument or whatever, it's easy for me to want to move beyond that so quickly and then
Hmm.
into some sort of solution, or what are we going to do about it? But just this counselor going, Greg, slow down. Her pain deserves a response from you. And I would say, and it deserves one first and foremost from her own self. And that's the part of the growth as an individual that you can't experience. Let's say your marriage isn't restored. Man, you can come out of this a healthier, closer to the Lord, um, person, because you're focusing then on the right thing. I always tell people, the worst question to ask is, how can I have a better marriage? The best
Hmm.
question is, how can I be a better husband? How can I be a better wife? Because we have control within that. Aaron and I have to be willing to invest into our marriage to create a marriage that we both love. But I can always, you know, figure out, Lord, how do you want me to grow right now as a husband? Even if she's not willing, what can I do? And I think there's some hope there, first and foremost.
Okay. Does that feel like a good place to stop?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.